can you say me too if you can't remember what happened? Forget the book. Forget the memoir. This letter is exactly why Amy Griffin wrote The Tell. Buried inside of newly released court documents is a letter that Amy Griffin wrote to an editor attached to a book proposal. And so this letter and the first few pages tell me everything I need to know about why The Tell was written and what its purpose was. First thing Amy Griffin does is answer the question at the top of everyone's mind. Why would Amy Griffin write this book? And she tells you she has absolutely no reason to. She's got power and money and freedom and a great family and a great life. Why would she jeopardize that by giving and inviting the attention that publishing this book would bring? Oh yeah, that's right. We want to try and use the MeToo movement to promote MDMA. I don't know, that's what it's looking like to me. What do you think? Almost 6 years out from the rallying cry that marked the beginning of the hashtag MeToo movement, our culture is still broken. It goes on to give statistics about disclosure, shame, old cliches, and perpetrators. As she began to slowly share her story with people in her own life, she was stunned by how many of them volunteered their own memories. She was not alone. She goes on to talk about how something profound is happening in our culture, a shift in the way we talk and think about trauma and how it shapes our lives. She read this book after she recovered her own memories of trauma, and she talks about how it spent 150 weeks as a New York Times bestseller, 27 of those weeks at #1. A pioneering study at Kaiser shows that childhood trauma is linked not only to depression, anxiety, and substance abuse, but everything from broken bones to cancer. As I write this, Australia has become the first country to legalize MDMA, the medicine I took, alongside psilocybin, the chemical found in magic mushrooms, as treatment for PTSD. Studies have shown that 2/3 of people with PTSD no longer meet the diagnostic criteria for it after treatment with psychedelic-assisted therapy. Thanks to the MAPS, same program that my husband John has been supporting for years now, it's likely that America isn't far behind. Girl, we are coming to understand that there's a powerful link between trauma and our own health, that it can be carried in the body and manifest in countless ways, as it was for me. Trauma has become a buzzword, a cultural lightning rod. Trauma! Girl. The issues that I'm writing about in my personal story that this is so sick to read. The issues that I'm writing about in my own personal story that felt so unbelievable and specific to me was unfolding are sadly far from niche. This may be a defining subject of our era, and yet trauma remains so poorly understood and so stigmatized. No wonder we keep it repressed. When I was growing up, people didn't talk about breast cancer because it was considered crude to say the word breast. Breast! The taboo around sexuality kept us from talking about a medical condition, and it still does today. Girl. She goes on to say, like trauma itself that so many of us endure, it's something people don't talk about, if they can even access the memories at all. As one friend put to me, how can you say me too if you can't remember what happened? Amy goes on to say, from the moment she began recovering her own memories, she knew that she would someday write about it. In fact, at the end of her first session, she began writing, first by hand, later on an iPad. Don't worry, it wasn't connected to the cloud because she wanted to make sure that nobody else could read it. She goes on to say, she processed her feelings by writing, and writing made what happened to me concrete. It preserved it in the record. I can't help but feel like this was all planned. This nagging feeling of the premeditation of all of this is just gross, in my opinion. Preserved to the record, it could not be rescinded. It was the only way to sift through the wreckage of this unbelievable reckoning. It goes on, yet to me, even more unbelievable than the abuse itself was the fact that I had so successfully erased it from my memory. When I first began to slowly share my story with the people I loved, they too found it hard to believe. Most knew well enough not to say what they were thinking. Why didn't you tell anyone? How are you just remembering it now? How did no one notice? And wait, what is this drug? Any hint of skepticism in someone's voice made me furious. Eventually, I would come to understand that even deeper than the wounds of the abuse itself was the wound of how the perpetrator had isolated me in his secret, insisting that nobody would believe me. To truly heal, I had to be believed, and that all started with me believing myself. At the beginning, I didn't. For months, I looked desperately for any evidence that I could be misremembering my own abuse, hoping that the childhood friend would say the tile in the middle school bathroom was red instead of yellow, so I could declare the whole thing fiction. Yet the deeper I dug, the more my memories were substantiated. I would learn that the circumstances around my recovered memories were far from unusual. Many women only begin to recall their own abuse when their children reach the age that they themselves were. She researched this whole shit! I'm so angry. I'm so angry. Sorry for the outburst. I'm sorry for the outburst, but it's the police phone call, the interviews where she's just going, it's because my kids became that age. And all of a sudden I just felt like, wow, my daughters are that. It's gross. This is gross. In my opinion, allegedly. It's only when the stakes are that high, our own children's safety, that the connection is made and the desire to protect becomes strong enough to pierce the wall that separates us from our most painful memories. In my career, I've had the privilege of guiding women as they step into their power, many of them for the first time, build businesses with the mission of changing for the better. Blah, blah, blah. There's a light when we don't hide. If this book can be held by my friends and family with the women who I work with, the teachers at my daughter's school, the survivors who I may never meet, I know this will all be worth it. My story, as I've told here, is a personal account. I'm not an expert on mental health or abuse. This is my own memories and how I've navigated the lived experience of healing trauma in my body and mind. Yet it's also a research project, reconstructed from my diaries, recorded conversations with my therapists and attorneys, my session notes from treatment, personal correspondence, and a vast array of other primary source materials. It's so important to me that every word of this is true, not just for my own integrity, but because I want it. I'm so angry! Because I want to take readers on the exact same journey I went on of mistrusting myself, doubting myself, and ultimately learning to listen to my own inner strength. It's also the story of my family and how the trust and communication I'd built with my husband, John, over the course of our marriage allowed me to be vulnerable enough to explore this part of myself. How my children inspired and challenged me to face my truth. Although this is not an instruction manual for survivors of abuse, I want it to be useful to everyone who reads it, to help understand how it was not useful, honey. It was not helpful to any of us. It was so unrelatable. Help understand the larger landscape of trauma, how insidiously children can be groomed, and how to spot the warning signs that both I and everyone in my own world missed. I don't think your book did that. I've been told by doctors that it's a miracle I survived what happened to me, since many others end up struggling with addiction, mental illness, and self-harm. But as I've come to find out, trauma doesn't always lead to self-destruction. Perfectionism, hyperproductivity, an obsession with achievement, the demons that plague me my whole life, can be signs of trauma too. Most people, that's true. That is true. Most people never think to pay attention to the highest achieving child, but they could be the one who is suffering the most. This book is many things: a memoir, a deeply personal account of what happened to me, how I processed the revelations, but it's also a mystery. An investigation into the man. He didn't investigate much. I don't even think he talked to him. This is the page that's the most damning of them all. It's a manifesto, a document of how she redefined her relationship of power after being robbed of it, and how she became to believe herself, even within a culture that denies women their credibility, to emerge stronger than ever. All of it's true, except for the very first line of this letter. That's the only thing here that isn't true. Girl. A manifesto? A manifesto? For MDMA, MeToo movement, recovered memories? I just